Hello and welcome to this week's NASCAR News Zone on Motorsports Reports. My name is Phil, and along with my good buddy George, we're going to discuss some of the key news stories that took place in the world of NASCAR this past week. The three main stories that we will discuss are the Richard Petty and Kid Rock controversy that came up. This from the Daytona 500 during the pre-race and during the race, and Cletus McFarland, should he have been cleared to race in the NASCAR Truck Series in the Truck Series opener at Daytona? And is it possible that Dale Earnhardt Jr. will return for next year's Daytona 500 based on takeaways from his wife Amy, the discussion that they had in the evening after they had put their kids to bed? This and more will be discussed. Make sure you go and hit the timestamp for the particular story if you want to just look at one particular story, but definitely like, subscribe, and thanks for supporting us here on Motorsports Reports. And we look forward to providing more content as the season picks up, since NASCAR is going to continue going on. We have IndyCar coming up, and of course Formula One in a few weeks' time. In a video that I figure will get a lot of clicks because of who is being mentioned in it, YouTube sensation Garrett Mitchell, aka Cletus McFarland, was taken to task by one of the premier spotters in NASCAR, in Freddie Kraft, who is the host of Door Bumper Clear on the Dirty Mo Media empire and their conglomerate podcasts and stuff. He's the longtime friend and spotter for Darrell Walsh Jr. in the Cup Series, and then he works and works for other drivers in other series. He was outspoken about how McFarland was approved and then proceeded to wreck 7 laps into a 100-lap race at Daytona in the Truck Series. And he goes, this is quoting Freddie Kraft, "This is going to be very unpopular, and I'm sorry, but what are we doing? Are we trying to get the best race car drivers on the racetrack, or are we trying to get the biggest social media following?" There are two glaring examples this weekend. One was Cletus, obviously, in the truck race, end quote. And then the other one was referencing Natalie Decker, which was brought up in another video here on the Motorsports Reports. But he goes further to say, what has he done? For me, I get it. There's a system in place that you have to run certain races, get approved for other races. The system should not be based on participation. It needs to be based on results. Guy ran 2 plate races last year, wrecked in both of them, wrecked half the field in one of them trying to do a restart. Now, I think he's mixing up, of course, Daytona, the last year famous interview he had post-race, had spun out then, or one incident, then was taken out by another, I guess, social media influencer in a crash 17 laps into that race. And then I think he's referencing Charlotte Motor Speedway in the ARCA race, where he was on the front row and caused a major wreck there. He ran at Talladega and ran all right for a good amount of the race before getting taken out there, getting in an incident. Talking about what happened in the truck race itself, we're just lucky the other night that he didn't wipe out the truck field, because when he spun, he went down instead of up, and he was running in the top 10 when it happened. It was just dumb luck that he didn't wipe out half the field. We talk about safety. I'm sure he's a great guy. He seems like a phenomenal person. He's got great car control in the videos I watch. He drives anything in the world. He's not ready for what he's doing, so you can't approve these people to go out there. In the reality of the world is there's a process that has to be met to go and drive certain tracks, certain lengths of tracks. There's been exceptions. There's been times where people have been denied. There's been times that have been, in terms of not being given the clearance, people who have actually won at Daytona in one particular instance, and Talladega wasn't cleared based on length of time it had been since their last race. But in the case of Cletus McFarland, he's one of the most popular people on YouTube in terms of in motorsports and racing, whether it involves him driving ARCA or driving trucks or whatever. The likes of Dale Earnhardt Jr. didn't seem bothered by him getting cleared, but he does feel like he needs to spend more time in smaller series learning these vehicles before coming back up for another opportunity.
Richard the King Petty has got himself in a bit of trouble after the Daytona 500. Here's why. The all-time NASCAR legend, and in a lot of people's eyes, the GOAT of the sport, personally, in my eyes, but I know people will disagree with that, but that's not the topic of debate here today. He was over at the Daytona 500 this year to cheer on former Richard Petty Motorsports driver Eric Jones, who is currently driving for Legacy Motor Club, and the 88-year-old was seen with a few famous faces too. The 7-time NASCAR Cup Series champion caught up with a few celebrities at the track, including country and rock singer Kid Rock. Kid Rock, whose real name is Robert James Ritchie, you can see why he goes as Kid Rock, has attracted some criticism for both his unabashed support of President Donald Trump, as well as some of his old lyrics in his songs. It came as a NASCAR star stripped down to her underwear and posed shirtless on the track. No, I am not going to show you pictures of that. Look it up in your spare time, you dirty dog. In a 2001 song, Rock sang, quote, young ladies, I like 'em underage. See, some say that's statutory, but I say it's mandatory, end quote. You can see why that's caused some controversy, especially with what's going on right now with the Epstein files. Yes, I had to mention it. In an appearance on Saturday Night Live around the same time, he made a joke that he can't wait for the 18th birthday of Mary-Kate and Ashley Olsen, who were both 14 at the time. Yuck. Petty posted a photo with Kid Rock on his Instagram with the caption, quote, American icons, welcome to Daytona, end quote, and many people in the comments were upset about this. One person wrote, quote, hard to watch a good man like Petty fall into the MAGA trap, end quote. Another person wrote, quote, love you, King, not that other fella, end quote. And Pug Daddy Baddie, yes, that is their name on Instagram, that's a different crime by itself, but we're not going to go into that, puts a very strong case forward, saying, quote, MAGA is terrorizing, killing and detaining innocent people, as well as protecting abusers of children. I've always been a Richard Petty fan, but he knew what he was doing by posting this picture. Jimmy Johnson, if you see this, you need to have a talk with the co-owner of your team. You are putting an entire brand and historical legacy in jeopardy. End quote. But I would like to add a bit of caveat to this. I'm not going to properly defend Richard Petty here because only he can answer for himself when it comes to these actions. Perhaps there is a chance that he's not aware of Kid Rock and his music and what he's been saying and doing in recent times when it comes to these interviews. I'll be totally honest, I'm on the other side of the Atlantic. I don't know much about Kid Rock. I didn't know he was a rampant Trump fan. I didn't know he had that lyric in his song. Can't say I'm a big fan of his music, especially after hearing that. Sounds downright disgusting. Also, on top of that too, is it really Richard Petty who's posting stuff to Instagram or his social media? I doubt it is personally. I don't really use social media much. You'll see me on social media a lot, but it's not actually me, believe it or not, who's posting the videos. I don't have the time for that. I don't want to be involved with that. For my own mental health, I stay off of social media for the vast majority of cases. I don't really go into those depths of depravity, effectively. An 88-year-old Richard Petty, is he really tweeting and posting pictures on Instagram in his spare time? I reckon there's somebody else that does that for him. So really the responsibility does probably lie with the person who posted that stuff. Honestly, it's not a great look seeing Petty obviously next to Kid Rock like that, but I really doubt that was him who was actually posting that picture online. So like I said, I think there's more that needs to be explained and we need a bit more context when it comes to this. Did Petty know about what Kid Rock has been doing and saying? You might say, well, you should know about that, and you could definitely argue that, but I didn't. I'll be totally honest, I didn't. I'm not in those circles. I don't follow Kid Rock. I don't follow the MAGA movement. You'll be probably shocked to hear I'm not a big fan of all that. So maybe it's just an unfortunate set of circumstances. I don't know. But I don't want to go attacking the king. He's an absolute legend in NASCAR. Like I said, for me, he's the absolute GOAT, undisputed. You can argue other people, you can argue Johnson, you can argue Earnhardt, you can argue people like that, right? But for me, he's number 1, and he always will be. Or number 43, I should say, because that was his racing number. So yeah, guys, controversial one. I did not expect to be talking about Kid Rock today. Always happy to talk about Richard Petty, but what do you think about this, guy? Should the King have to apologise? Should he even comment on this? Should he address this publicly? Give a bit more context to what was going on there? I want to hear what you have to say in the comments below on this as always. Like, share, comment, subscribe. As always, guys, have a fantastic time wherever you're in the world today, and we'll see you very soon. Have a good one.
One of the great actors in American film history was Robert Duvall, and he has just passed away at the age of 95 a few days ago. And connecting it to motorsports, he was the crew chief in Days of Thunder, playing Harry Hogg, based loosely on the great Harry Hyde, who won championships and many races in NASCAR Cup Series competition. Most famously was with Tim Richmond, who in a lot of ways the character of Cole Trickle was loosely based upon. One quote in that movie that will always stand out, and I of course will not be able to do it justice, but it was contact with Cole Trickle, the character played by Tom Cruise, and Rowdy Burns, played by Michael Rooker. And now, of course, Kyle Busch for many years has used the Rowdy moniker in his career. But Cole Trickle was upset with how he was being raced and being bumped and moved, akin to someone like Dale Earnhardt. And the reaction, and he got on the radio, and interestingly connecting to another video we're talking about, and with one of the incidents that took place at Daytona. But Robert Duvall famously said, "He didn't slam into you, he didn't bump you, he didn't nudge you, he rubbed you, and rubbing, son, is racing," end quote. And that quote and that line has been used loosely as a means to get around moving people over, getting into people, possibly going and crashing other drivers over the years. The notion that, so many lines and so many references have come from the likes of Days of Thunder, which was probably a little more of a closer connection to racing than even the likes of Talladega Nights. But, you had great acting, you had great actors in that, you had director, the whole bit. It was a massive production. Hendrick Motorsports, before they became Hendrick Motorsports, was behind a lot of what took place, supplying cars. And Rick Hendrick, the owner, that was played by Randy Quaid, owning a used car dealership, the City Chevrolet, also loosely referencing what Rick Hendrick started out as when he started his team way back in 1983. But this video is about the great Robert Duvall. He had many great lines, many great parts, but connecting it to motorsports, this was the one that he had, and he did a great job in this movie. And we have lost a great American acting icon, but I'm sure he's having fun with a lot of his friends up there now. Whether it was due to being cooped up in the motor coach with her 2 daughters for too long, or something else, the wife of Dale Earnhardt Jr. referenced the possibility of her husband returning to possibly race in the Daytona 500. The 2-time Daytona 500 winner in 2004 and 2014, 2 different types of cars, 2 different types of racing back then. Of course, has owned with his sister Kelly the Junior Motorsports organization, which has a alliance connection with Hendrick Motorsports, who of course he's been with in some way, shape, or form since 2008. Earnhardt, who retired from competitive Cup Series competition in 2017 after multiple concussions and concussion-like symptoms, also looking at the future and wanting to be around for his kids. has not driven a Cup Series race since he got out of the car at Homestead in 2017, what theoretically also was Matt Kenseth's last race or something, and he came back. But for Earnhardt Jr. himself, he went and said, and this was a reaction on his Dale Jr. download, he was quoted as saying, "Amy told me I should run the Daytona 500 next year," Earnhardt Jr. said, and quote, "I was like, what?" We were laying in bed and Sunday night after the race, and she was like, "You should drive it next year." I'm like, "Hello? Pardon me? What you say? Are you okay?" End quote. Now, of course, Junior, this is coming off of all the great energy that came from the Daytona weekend. A lot of positive feedback. A lot of people returning to the sport post lawsuit. The likes of Tony Stewart driving a truck at Daytona with Ram to connect his Dodge deal because he owns the Dodge program in NHRA. His first time being back at the track in a few years. You know, the changes that had to take place within NASCAR, getting rid of certain people, including Steve Phelps. Dale Earnhardt Jr. being one of the most outspoken people in the sport and leaders in terms of making changes, which include changes that have taken place with the Gen 7 Cup car, changes that have included the points championship returning to what is now a chase format again, 10 race chase compared to what it had been in the past with the playoff format. He has run 10 O'Reilly Auto Parts races since his retirement from Cup Series competition. He hasn't run one since 2024. Due to TV commitments and other things going on in life. Of course, he works for Amazon and TNT as a TV analyst for 10 races, but he also has Durimo Media, he has Junior Motorsports, he's a dad of 2 kids, he's a husband, you know, all that stuff. So we'll see what happens with Junior and if old Junebug will return to drive and Chris Stapleton decides he wants to run again next year in the Daytona 500 if that 40 car will be driven by Junior. Combining a couple of news items that took place this past weekend at Daytona and the lead up or during or post Daytona 500, there was a Daytona Beach resident who left aggressive messages to a NASCAR executive and was firing a gun in a video. They tracked down a gentleman named Adrian Morales at an apartment complex located across from Daytona International Speedway. Was taken into custody the day before the Daytona 500. This gentleman was allegedly shooting an AR-15 assault rifle and was quoted saying, "This is what's in store." The Volusia Sheriff's Office stated the new threats were not directed at a NASCAR executive, but Morales' proximity to the racetrack was concerning due to past messages and grievances. He's been ordered to be held in jail without bond. So that's one aspect. And then there were a couple of fans that tried to make things a bit uncomfortable and referencing certain people. There was a post-race interview for Daniel Suarez this year driving for Spire Motorsports, and a fan ran in and shouted 47 baby, which some or a lot within the media that covers the sport are making to a reference to the current U.S. president. Other people are trying to make a reach to say that it was a nod to Ricky Stenhouse Jr., who had finished second in the race, but as much as people may want to believe that, he ain't that popular. But there's no excuse to act like this. And then there was supposedly a fan scattering ashes on the track during the final lap of the Daytona 500. So a lot of weird and unusual behaviors going on during the weekend at Daytona, on a weekend that saw a lot of positives take place for NASCAR, a lot of good news in a time where there's been a lot of negative, a lot of bad going on in the world, and a lot of bad people seemingly being emboldened. Daytona was supposed to be a respite, and for a lot of teams and a lot of individuals it was. They had a great time and it was a great weekend and sold out crowds and everything, but it's just a reminder of how fragile that can be in terms of having that freedom and having that ability to have access when you have a few people who decide they want to go and make it. If Denny Hamlin has his druthers, the speeds will increase at Daytona, Talladega, Atlanta, anywhere where they do drafting tracks, but especially Daytona and Talladega due to the type of racing that they have to do and they were doing for a good amount of this past weekend's Daytona 500. He is quoted as saying in multiple places, "There's a way, but we're going to have to increase the speeds by a lot," end quote. You're going to make it where handling matters. That's going to spread the field. That's going to make it to where it'll look a little more like racing from the past. He is referencing when he started racing in the mid 2000s as a rookie in 2006, you had to have a good handling race car at Daytona, even at Talladega before the repave, or that was the first year of a repave actually in 2006, but you needed to have a good handling race car to be able to win the Daytona 500. There was plenty of bumps, the weather, of course, different climates. It's gotten more extreme even in all these years later. They didn't repave the track until 2010 or 11 after multiple incidents. There was issues with the track coming up in 2010 that affected a 2010 Daytona 500 where Jamie McMurray won. You also had the Juan Pablo Montoya suspension or rear end failure that caused his car to hit a jet dryer. That also affected turns 3 and 4. Handling was a key. It was a key this weekend, to be fair. If you put too much wheel into the car coming off of turns 3 and 4 or truck, you were liable to spin out and hit the wall. It happened during the 500 as well, but a lot of the race was spent running at 50-60% throttle, managing fuel so that they would have less time on pit road. It seems a lot like what road racing would be in NASCAR, where they're trying to manage fuel. They're trying to go and make pit stops at a certain time, running the race backwards. We've had the likes of Kenny Wallace say have a competition, non-competitive pit stop, 25 laps to go and at these races, and then fuel them up and say go. But I think there's a downforce aspect, removing downforce off of the cars because there's so much drag on the next gen vehicle between the diffuser, the splitter, and the rear spoiler. There's probably an addition of horsepower opening up the tapered spacer where they would have to do that to add additional horsepower because they only run about 180. I say only 180 something miles an hour in qualifying. Back in the day, of course, in the heyday of NASCAR, it was in the 190s. Even 200 miles an hour. But then the next issue would then be about cars taking off. And I guess that's where the balance will have to be to see if they move the Clash back to Daytona. That might be a sign. All those might be different signs as to what might be coming in regards to Superspeedway pack racing in future years. After a chaotic last lap that saw multiple leaders, 2311 Racing's Tyler Reddick came through at the end, avoiding a wreck to win the 68th Daytona 500 for his organization, giving Michael Jordan, his team owner or co-owner, an early birthday present, his 63rd birthday present, by winning the 500. It was the biggest win in the organization's history, of course, coming off of winning the Brickyard 400 last August with Darrell Walsh Jr. Now that means 2 of the last 3, signature events, or what would once be called Winston Million events, have been won by 2311. MJ was quoted as saying, "It feels like I won a championship, but until I get my ring, I won't even know," Jordan said. And his co-owner, Denny Hamlin, talked about this with the organization during a preseason meeting about the joy that winning brings to Michael Jordan, who of course is one of the greatest athletes of all time and 6-time NBA champion, all this and the other, very competitive person, let alone now an owner of one of the biggest NASCAR teams. Denny Hamlin said, you guys understand the responsibilities you have, that you have the power to bring joy to Michael Jordan. You have that power and nobody else can do it, end quote. There's nothing else I can bring him the joy that's seeing what his team can do, and they took it to heart, end quote. So Reddick had only led the last few hundred feet of the race, for 100 yards, whatever way you want to do it. And he was the 25th different driver to lead of the 41 starters in the race on Sunday, which is a race record. Reddick said, just incredible how it all played out. Just true Daytona madness. I've already lost my voice from screaming. Never thought I'd be Daytona 500 champion. It's his 9th career win, first time since late in 2024. Of course, concerns for him were for his infant son, who had a tumor in his chest that affected his heart. Had a runner-up finish in last year's 500 to Byron, snapped a 38 race losing streak by going and winning on Sunday. Darrell Wallace Jr. had led the race high 40 laps and was in position late before the last round of pit stops. He was visibly dejected and disappointed in falling short, but was also very proud and happy that his teammate and organization had won. I'm quoted as saying, "I don't want my emotions to take away from the monumental day they just accomplished. Happy birthday, MJ. That's a massive birthday present. I thought this was our week, the best 500 I've ever had, and come up short. Sucks. Led a lot of laps, lap leader, I believe. It was a good day for us, but damn, try again next year." The final sequence was triggered in part because Denny Hamlin and teammate Christopher Bell made contact, and so there's a lot that went with that in terms of the whole weekend. All the winners in the weekend in the top 3 series had some connection to the lawsuit that took place between NASCAR and 2311 and Front Row Motorsports, along with, of course, Richard Childress, who's brought up by now former NASCAR chairman Steve Phelps in text messages. So interesting how all 3 of those protagonists in that lawsuit all came out with victories this past weekend. But for this and more, please keep track with Motorsports Reports.